Arsenal have reportedly set their price for midfielder Martin Zubimendi with interest from Chelsea but also Real Madrid. As an alternative to Martin Zubimendi, Xabi Alonso has also mentioned that he's interested in PSG midfielder Fabian Ruiz. Tosin Adarabioyo is attracting interest from Benfica to reunite with previous manager Marco Silva. Cy Phillips gives us more midfield updates with what's going on with Enzo Fernandez and potentially us going back in for Alex Scott, as well as talking about our dealings with Crystal Palace and how they might still go in for Axel Disasi but are also interested in Josh Achiampong. Sources report that the under-21 players absolutely loved the preseason tour with Xabi Alonso, but supposedly some of the other players weren't happy about feeling like they were part of the B team. Welcome, Blue Believers, to another episode of the Stamford Sync, where we are syncing up with everything Chelsea FC. And after what feels like a crazy preseason with back-to-back games, which is just bizarre in itself, it's time to get back into looking at the ins and outs that Chelsea still need to make before the end of the window. So let's have a little look at what's going on in the world of Chelsea today. Starting off, Transfer News Live posted this via Mundo Deportivo. Arsenal have reportedly set a minimum asking price of £78 million for Martin Zubimendi amid interest from Real Madrid and Chelsea. The Gunners signed the midfielder for around £60 million last summer, but Bruno Guimaraes' arrival has increased competition for places. Real Madrid are monitoring Zubimendi, whilst Chelsea could also enter the race due to Xabi Alonso's admiration for the 27-year-old. So look, I guess in terms of the narrative that's going on, it kind of makes sense. Real Madrid have failed to get Rodri, and he seemed to be one of their biggest targets. It seems like he is on his way to Barcelona. And Chelsea, if we've learned anything over the preseason, it's that we still don't seem to have that partner for Moises Caicedo. And the fact that a lot of today's talk is going to be about midfielders. I think the fact that there is so much midfield talk going on, and in itself, the bid that we had knocked back for Alex Scott is indicative that we are going to be going in for another midfielder. And as much as people can say, but we've got Enzo Fernandez coming back, it potentially looks like either we don't expect him to stay or he is not seen as that proper partner for Moises Caicedo in midfield. So Martin Zubimendi would be a weird one, right? Because Arsenal have just won the league and he played a relatively big part in that. But I do understand from his perspective, when you think of the type of player that he is, Bruno Guimaraes coming in all of a sudden is a bit like, oh, hang on a second, what's going on here? Because Arsenal generally have been playing like a 4-2-3-1, haven't they, for the most part? So they've been playing some sort of centre attacking midfielder. They've got Eze. They do still have Martin Odegaard as well. They've got Kai Havertz, who can kind of play that number 10/attacking number 8 position. And all of a sudden, spots look a little bit tight, don't they? Now, obviously, they're in the Champions League. They've got European football, so there will be a lot of games going around. But Bruno Guimaraes is, I guess, Declan Rice isn't going anywhere, is he? At the end of the day, he does have some potential fitness and injury worries, but for the most part, when your whole squad's fit, at the moment for Arsenal, it kind of makes sense to think, okay, so it's Declan Rice and Guimaraes is that deep line midfield, and Zubimendi might be starting to look at that, being like, hold on a second, what's happening to my position in this team? Now, I think, at the end of the day, for me, all of these midfielders that we're being linked to, there are some that I would like, and there are some that I don't know much about, and there are some that I'm not particularly bothered about. But where I sit with it, ultimately, is if Xabi Alonso gets the guy that he wants, I'm happy. 78 million for Martin Zubimendi is pricey, but you've got to think that's in and around probably what we'd have to end up paying for Alex Scott. Bearing in mind that obviously Arsenal bought him for 60 mil last summer, and he won the Premier League as well, and he's only 27, so he's still got a few years left in the tank. Guys, what do you think about Martin Zubimendi? The first time I heard about this, I just kind of writ it off. But at the same time, with Guimaraes coming in, that does make competition for that particular spot a little bit more intense, doesn't it? Because like I say, if Declan Rice is fit, he's playing. They sold Norgard, I think it was, so they are technically one light now, but in terms of, they haven't brought in the replacement for Norgard, have they? They've brought in Bruno Guimaraes to upgrade their midfield. So if Martin Zubimendi is feeling a little bit like, oh, well, I'm not sure where my, he's going to have to fight for a spot with Guimaraes now, isn't he, at the end of the day? And I'm not going to lie to you, as much as I would not be disappointed to see Martin Zubimendi into the squad, because I think he does represent the type of midfielder that Xabi Alonso is looking for to partner Moises Caicedo, but I want to know what you think in the comments. And guys, if you've made it this far into today's episode of the Stamford Sync, please do me the distinct honour of liking and sharing the video, subscribe to the channel, or just roast me in the comments, whatever gets you through your day. Right, so this is going to be a very midfielder heavy video, so let's move straight on to the next one. Transfer News Live posted this via The Guardian. Chelsea are preparing a move to sign PSG midfielder Fabian Ruiz. Xabi Alonso wants the 30-year-old Spain international, with Chelsea potentially offering more than 60 million euros. Fabian recently renewed his PSG contract and currently intends to stay at the club. So I get this one. played big part in the Euros when they won that. Obviously, has played, in the World Cup and won that. He's won 2 Champions Leagues back to back. He's been winning leagues with PSG since he's been there. Their midfield has been phenomenal for the last few seasons as well. But they are a relatively young team, and he obviously at 30 years old, maybe PSG might be looking at him being like, right, okay, cool, we want to refresh our midfield. I think when you think about would I rather have Fabian Ruiz than Martin Zubimendi? Yes, I think the accolades and the experience, albeit Martin Zubimendi won the Premier League last season, Fabian Ruiz is winning international tournaments, he's winning the league out in France, and he's winning the Champions League back to back with PSG. So from an experience point of view, this is kind of more like the Granit Xhaka signing, but a little bit younger. Do you know what I mean? Where he comes in with the experience, but you're going to get a lot more of him out on the pitch as well. 60 million euros, what's that, 50 million pounds basically? Maybe just about 52 million pounds, something in and around that. So it's not a huge amount of money for a player of that experience, but at the same time, he is 30 years old. Now, when you juxtapose that against the fact that Arsenal have just paid, 85 mil for a nearly 29-year-old Bruno Guimaraes, it actually all of a sudden doesn't look that bad, like I say, when you consider the level of experience that you're getting in there. And like I say, it does just seem, based on what we saw in pre-season and based on the fact that we're having bids for the likes of Alex Scott knocked back and we're still talking about midfielders, it does look like that Xabi Alonso is looking for that partner. I don't hate the idea of a Fabian Ruiz. Any older player at the moment getting into the squad, I don't think is a terrible idea, because it gives Xabi Alonso something for right now, but it also gives him, the sporting directors and the ownership in Blueco, a little bit of a buffer, a little bit of a time to kind of look at it and be like, right, okay, who's the young ideal guy we want for that position? Who's the Moises Caicedo of that side, essentially? Because they want to start building a team that's going to kind of play together and go on for ages. So if we can't get that guy right now, like if an Alex Scott or an Adam Wharton or someone like that isn't available and we haven't identified the other option that we'd like to bring into that midfield, then I think someone like a Fabian Ruiz, to me, is a little bit more attractive than a Martin Zubimendi, based on the fact that he's won so much. Next up, time to talk about Uncle Tosin Adarabioyo, who has not covered himself in glory over the preseason, I think it has to be said, and whilst he was on preseason, Fabrizio Romano did drop the bomber that apparently there is movement around him. Transfer News Live posted this via CM Jornal. Benfica manager Marco Silva wants Chelsea centre-back Tosin Adarabioyo to strengthen his defence. The 28-year-old previously worked under Silva for 3 seasons at Fulham before later joining Chelsea. Adarabioyo has now emerged as the defender Silva would like Benfica to sign. So, yeah, it makes sense. Portuguese clubs are not spending huge amounts on players in general, are they? They make a lot of money for selling their players. And there's some conversation also being had, although there's not much about it yet, so I'll talk about it if it heats up, about Thomas Araujo, a 24-year-old centre-back who currently plays for Benfica, so there might be some sort of deal to be done there. But Tosin Adarabioyo, look, I think it just makes sense at this point, doesn't it? Unfortunately, I think the pre-season was kind of his opportunity to show that he belongs around the team from a quality perspective, because it's not a personality thing, right? Everyone at the squad like him. He's really well loved. He's really good friends with Cole Palmer. I just don't think that's important at all, to be honest. And also, supposedly, he has indicated that he wouldn't mind being like a rotational backup option just to kind of stay at Chelsea. But when you think it's evident we need to bring in quality, right? Because you're only ever one injury away from a crisis with our centre-back situation at the moment. And there's still questions about what's going to happen. Ansel Mino injured now. Mamadou Sarr, not really. He actually was supposed to play in the game yesterday, but I assume pulled out with an injury last minute. And also there's Josh Achiampong, who we're going to get into a little bit later as well. But there's just a lot of questions about our depth at the moment in the centre-back position. So look, whether a 24-year-old Thomas Araujo is the guy to go for, or we look for like another John Stones type, for instance, someone with a bit more experience, wouldn't mind playing a little bit less. Either way, I think most Chelsea fans would agree that Uncle Tosin Adarabioyo, it is time for him to move on. And obviously he played well for Marco Silva for a few years at Fulham. The opportunity to go out and play in Portugal is not one to be sniffed at, so maybe this is, one that makes sense. I think it'll be like 10, 12 mil at this point. Do you know what I mean? I don't think we'll make much for him at all. But with Tosin, it's not even necessarily about the money, it's just freeing up the squad space. So guys, let me know what you think about Uncle Tosin Adarabioyo in the comments. Do you think that the Benfica one is the one for him? Or do you think we should actually just keep him around? So next up, we're going to hop over to the Cy Phillips Sports Substack, where we're first going to talk about Enzo Fernandez and Alex Scott. So interesting article that he wrote and released released yesterday, and it goes as follows. Enzo Fernandez is expected back at Chelsea next week when the lads return from their pre-season tour. There is nothing to suggest that Fernandez is not going to be returning, and the belief is that he is expected to carry out protocol and remain professional. That'd be a surprise. We hadn't seen much of that from him recently. However, multiple SPTC sources have confirmed that Fernandez has a desire to still leave Chelsea this summer. On the club side, Chelsea's stance via club sources is that they have always been happy to keep Fernandez in the squad, as is Xabi Alonso, if no club pays their asking price for plus £120 million. However, we've heard from our SPTC sources that this is a tough stance that Chelsea are taking publicly, and there is a chance that a number of players become fire sold later in the window, with Fernandez possibly one of them. An example of this is that one source has told us there would be some talk of a possible loan move away for Fernandez with an obligation to buy attached. Mate, so I think it was on one of the episodes of the Talking Chelsea podcast. We were talking about like how we're getting our players out and stuff, and I literally said, I was like, it's not like we're going to loan Enzo Fernandez. Or can you imagine loaning Enzo Fernandez? The obligation's going to have to be really easily met though, isn't it? Let's be completely honest. That'd be absolutely wild if we loaned out Enzo Fernandez this summer because no one wants to pay the money for him right now. That'd be crazy. The article continues, as reported many times, Manchester City are keen on Fernandez. Enzo Maresca asked for him when he first joined City. He also mentioned Malo Gusto and Pedro Neto. Fernandez and Maresca enjoyed a very close relationship at Chelsea, so there is certainly an appeal there from the player to reunite with him. City are expected to make a serious move for Fernandez once Rodri is sold. So that's interesting because the Rodri move is taking a little while to go through, but it does look like he'll be at Barcelona very, very soon. However, it is also important to state that sources have mentioned that anything can still happen with this one, and Fernandez staying is not being fully written off. There's talks between Chelsea and his agent over the weekend, and literally anything can still happen here. But the bottom line is that Fernandez wants to leave. Chelsea will sell, especially if after these talks they see Fernandez's clear priority is to leave. The current price tag is a sticking point, but it could drop. So look, for me personally, like, you know, if you've been watching my channel for a while, you'll know this. Like, I think the best thing to do is to cut ties with Fernandez, and if we can get him out for 100 mil, you still make a profit on him, and it's just done at that point, isn't it? Like, if we can make, you know, even 60 mil for Malo Gusto, 70 mil for Pedro Neto, do you know what I mean? There's still money to be made at this point. And for me personally, like, I just think Enzo Fernandez needs to go. So yeah, if we dropped it to like 100, 110, something like that, you know, I still think that would be worth doing. The article continues, it's obvious that if, and it's still a massive if, because I still feel he will leave, Fernandez does stay, then the narrative will be, he's always been happy to stay at Chelsea and never wanted to leave, he just wanted an improved contract, and Chelsea's stance will be, we always have Fernandez as an important piece of the project and he was never for sale. So yeah, obviously that makes sense. That's how the PR has been spun, isn't it? It continues, but to me, it's a fact that he has a clear desire to still leave Chelsea. Chelsea are still looking at new midfielders, and regardless of the Fernandez situation, there's still a feeling from sources that at least one new midfielder is being targeted to come in. Adam Wharton has been mentioned in talks with Palace regarding other players and may still be one to watch, and I'm currently being told by sources that Alex Scott to Chelsea is not off the table yet. They are currently weighing up a second offer, but it's all about timing per my top source. So the two players mentioned there, Adam Wharton and Alex Scott, they do seem to be the two targets. You know, there's been a lot of news coming out saying that we're still interested in both. For instance, I think the Adam Wharton one might be about to gain some steam because Crystal Palace are putting in an offer as of today for a Monaco midfielder who's worth about 50 million euros. And in terms of the Alex Scott thing, the timing, I think it could be similar in terms of waiting for them to get their replacements first. The timing could very much be Crystal Palace are willing to sell us Adam Wharton, but they want their replacement first so they don't get stung with the Adam Wharton money afterwards, right? And it could well be the same for Bournemouth. Like, if we get Alex Scott and we pay 70 mil plus for him and they go in for someone who they want to pay 30 mil for, then all of a sudden that 30 becomes 50 because they know they've got the Alex Scott money. So I don't know, it just seems like like I said, I mentioned it earlier, the midfield situation to me still feels really, really unresolved. And like I say, if you look at pre-season, I'm not going to lie to you, there's also been news in and around Dario Esugo potentially being loaned out. Romeo Lavia put in a really good performance, but as with Anselmino, he's a difficult one to shift one way or the other. Like, there's been some talk about Monaco coming in for him. And after that performance he put in the other day against AC Milan, you know, maybe there's a few more people interested in Romeo Lavia. But I think the other thing that maybe Xabi Alonso So it was really nice what he came out and said about Romeo Lavia, is that he kind of like pushed him to do that 90 minutes because he's had a bit of a mental block about it because of his injuries. And whilst I really appreciate that from a management perspective from Xabi Alonso, obviously backing his player, what that does is kind of take him off the market a little bit, isn't it? Because a lot of other teams that might have been looking at Romeo Lavia all of a sudden are now like, oh, player's got a mental block. We just need someone that can come in and do the job and play 90 minutes. So if anything, albeit I think he looked fantastic against AC Milan, and Xabi Alonso, I think it was amazing what he had to say, and it shows what a good manager he is. At the same time, that very situation probably makes Romeo Lavia a slightly even less attractive proposition than he already was just because of the injuries. So look, I think the midfield situation is still up in the air. We don't know what's going on with Barco yet. Is Reece James going to play in midfield? Essigo looks like, if we're going to buy two midfielders, then Essigo's probably going to be the one to make way, isn't he? Alex Scott can play the Moises Caicedo position as well as the partner to him. Adam Wharton is more of a Romeo Lavia type, essentially, to be completely honest. But either way, the midfielder stuff looks up in the air. Enzo Fernandez on loan, like... I mean, look, Nicholas Jackson on loan to Bayern Munich was a weird one anyway, do you know what I mean? If we loaned him to Man City, that'd be wild. I could see that loan maybe happening to Real Madrid, because obviously without them getting Rodri in, they're interested in a midfielder. So maybe that's the case there, where they don't want to spend the money on him yet. They want to give him to Jose Mourinho and see what it's like. But at the same time, I don't think we would sanction a loan for Enzo Fernandez unless it was with an easy obligation, right? Because it's too big of a risk at that point, isn't it? Because if he goes out on loan, doesn't get on with the manager, doesn't get played, then he comes back, then his value goes down. So it's a dangerous game to play with Enzo Fernandez there. But guys, let me know what you think about the midfielder situation. It seems to be getting a little bit crazy. Right, so sticking with Cy Phillips, we're going to move on to an article he wrote about Crystal Palace and Chelsea pursuits. He says Chelsea continue talks with Crystal Palace regarding a few players this transfer window, with more on this in another article today too. But for this article, we are covering a couple of players that Palace have been talking to Chelsea about. And of course, the deals could all end up being connected. Chelsea have always had good relations with Palace, so both clubs are willing to enter conversations regarding players. Palace have been speaking with Chelsea about both Axel Disasi and Josh Achiampong. As reported, Disasi also has an agreement with West Ham to join them, but he needs to make a decision on where he is going to go, as he's been holding out, so to speak, with other clubs, one of them being Palace. Chelsea have agreed a fee with West Ham for a permanent transfer for Disasi, but it is obviously down to the player where he goes. But the deal that Palace have spoken to Chelsea about for Disasi would be a loan with a buy and obligation, but Palace also really like Josh Achiampong and have been speaking with Chelsea about him. Chelsea have always been unwilling to sell Achiampong, but they have been open to a loan move. Palace cannot loan two players from Chelsea, so there is some sorting out and some decision making to do here on all sides. Palace were keen to buy Achiampong on a permanent deal, but Chelsea have told them he is not available for sale, only for loan. So we'll see what happens with this and how/if it ends up affecting any other possible deals with Palace. I guess if they want both players, then they will have to sign Disasi on a permanent and loan Achiampong, but let's see. So look, Axel Disasi, I get it, right? At the end of the day, he's holding out probably to see if a European club will come in for him, but that doesn't really look like it's happening because no one is willing to pay the money for Axel Disasi. Crystal Palace do genuinely seem interested, but they want a loan Axel Disasi, but they also want Josh Achiampong. I floated something in the Talking Chelsea podcast the other day that is not going to be a popular idea at all, but it is one way I could see them getting around this. Okay, Axel Disasi goes on his loan with the obligation to buy because we want to sell Axel Disasi to Crystal Palace permanently, right? But you can't loan two players to one club at the same time. So does Josh Achiampong... Look, okay, do you know what? Even before I float the idea, Josh Achiampong looked phenomenal against AC Milan the other day, but at the same time, he looked like he'd been struggling in other games leading up to that. So the thing with Josh Achiampong, he needs minutes. He needs to play. He absolutely 100% needs to play. And would he be more likely to get more minutes with less pressure at Crystal Palace than he would at Chelsea this season? Yes, I think so. So look, I will be buzzing if we keep Josh Achiampong, but if we keep Josh Achiampong and don't play him, it's pointless, isn't it? It's absolutely pointless. Because he's just not going to develop at that point. And also, it's I saw something the other day that was quite interesting. It's so rare that Chelsea Academy players get into the first team without going out on loan somewhere first. It's really, really, really rare that that happens. So look, it's just one of those, isn't it? So the idea for Josh Achiampong that I'm floating, and this isn't to say that I want it to happen, it's just how I could see this whole thing being resolved and fixed. You do actually sell Josh Achiampong to Crystal Palace with a very, very favourable buyback option, right? because you're not looking, it's essentially becomes a loan at that point. So is there some sort of option there where after, like, you basically sell Josh Achiampong to Crystal Palace, call it a 2-year deal, and you put a clause in it that either after the first year or after the second year, you can activate the buyback clause. So that might work for Crystal Palace because they wouldn't have to pay a lot for him to make it happen. Like, you just do it for 10 mil or whatever, didn't you? Like, because it doesn't matter, because we're essentially talking about ways to circumvent the system, which I think is something that Bluco will probably be quite keen to do. And if these are the ones that grease the wheels for other players coming in that they're interested in, and it gets Josh Achiampong the experience to go out and play at Crystal Palace while also allowing Axel Disasi to go on loan there. Look, I don't love it because I don't want to sell Josh Achiampong, but if you're able to put in a solid clause for a buyback that you are able to be in control of and activate, you know, money changes hands, so technically it is a sale. And then it's one of those things, isn't it? If Josh Achiampong goes out, year one doesn't develop enough, year two doesn't develop enough, in 2 years' time, with 2 years of Premier League football, if Chelsea aren't still interested in having him, then they just retain like a sell-on clause or like the buyback option or whatever it is. Do you know what I mean? But if he goes out there and smashes it in a year, then you activate the buyback clause, you buy him back. It's cost you a little bit of money, but it allows you to facilitate minutes for Josh Achiampong whilst also getting Axel Disasi off the books. I'm not saying it's something I would like to see. I'm just trying to use my brain to be like, how else could we facilitate this move, right? So look, interesting. I personally, it's so easy to just be won over by one performance, isn't it? Like, after the AC Milan performance, he was absolutely phenomenal. He was so good. And that's the Josh Achiampong you want to see in your team at the end of the day. And if he's going to perform like that all the time, then yeah, I think you keep him. But when you've got everyone else coming back in, your Reece James and, you know, Wesley Fofana looks like he's going to get minutes, and do you know what I mean? We've still got a lot of centre-backs on the books. Maybe Bluco need to get creative with finding ways to get him to a club like Crystal Palace, who will definitely be good for his development, but make sure we're able to bring him back in the future when we want to. Let me know what you think. Next up, we have two last little stories about pre-season, actually, and Xabi Alonso's effect on the squad and how everyone's feeling about it. So the first one is posted by Chelsea Dodgers via The Athletic. Sources close to some under-21 players on the tour remarked how they loved the experience of being involved. That unlike in previous years on such trips, there was not a case of senior players being in one area while they were made to feel they had to be elsewhere. So look, it's one of the first things we saw when they started training, right? Xabi Alonso was getting the youngsters to train with the first team. He was giving just as much time to the young players as he was to the first teamers as well. And he already seems to be bridging the gap between the academy and the first team in a way that we haven't really seen under the likes of Enzo Maresca. You know, a lot of players got a lot of minutes in this preseason. Obviously, Nicole Jazuli looked really good. Reggie Watson looked really good. Subaloy got some significant minutes, I think, as well. It's helped the likes of Reggie Walsh and Ryan Kavuma McQueen get out on, you know, while being looked at getting out on loans. It looks like Kavuma McQueen's going to be a Portsmouth player for next season. And I just think this is really important because what it does is it deepens your bench. Because the thing is, I thought about this the other day. I was talking to someone in my comments about it. It was really interesting. 16 years old feels too young for a Premier League player, doesn't it? Just off the bat, you're like, whoa, that's kind of wild. But then I start to think about it and I'm like, do you know what? Max Dowman, Rio Ngamoa from Liverpool, obviously the ex-Chelsea player as well. These guys were 16 years old and they're getting minutes in the Premier League as well. So it's not like I'm talking about these guys being first teamers, but if you are in a situation where you need a right centre-back or a deep line distributor in your centre midfield, bring Reggie Watson on. Give him. You know, maybe it's not even just about giving him a crack. Like, these guys have kind of shown that they're able to do it. Nicole Jazuli potentially an option as well. Even if it's cursory minutes to bring them on at the end of the game for a bit of pace, a bit of energy, even if it is cup games, even if it is, you know, relegation fodder or teams that have been promoted or something like that. There is maybe something actually to say that maybe we see a little bit more connection to the academy throughout the season and try and get some of these guys more significant minutes in the first team if they're capable and if they're good enough. Because this is the thing, that's what it all comes down to. Do they have the mentality? Ngamoa had the mentality. Max Dowman clearly has the mentality, and these guys have been trusted to play on a big stage and are doing well. They're not getting buckets and buckets and buckets of minutes. Do you know what I mean? It's not happening all the time. But if we can kind of fast track some of these guys' development, I'm all for it. But not everyone is absolutely buzzing about how the preseason went. So Chelsea Dodgers also posted this via The Athletic. Not everyone was happy with how things were going for them on the tour. More than one source connected to individuals in the travelling party said it was felt by some of them that Xabi Alonso had an A team and a B team. This led them to feel they would not be figuring in his plans because they would regularly be training and playing with what seemed like a second string of academy youngsters and fringe players linked with moves away. Chelsea do not agree a two-tier system was in place and say Alonso gave everyone, including under 21 players, a chance to impress. So look, Liam Delap, Tosin Adarabioyo, Dario Esugo, who else? Maybe Jamie Gittins, to be honest. Jamie Gittins did not look happy in the last game. It's a weird one. The Johor Darul Tazim game, Jamie Gittins played on left wing back, but I think body language is really important, right? I think you can see that Giovanni Kenda looks buzzing to be getting his opportunity, but when Jamie Gittins was playing on left wing back on that, he didn't look very happy, did he? And there's been some talks about low moves happening for him as well. So look, I'm not surprised. This was kind of always going to be the case because we've got so many players and we've still got 7 players to come back from the World Cup as well. Do you know what I mean? Absolutely wild. So albeit a lot of these players coming in will push out academy players, that is still going to push a lot of these other second string guys down to the bottom. And ultimately, after what now, 4 weeks, like a full month with the team, Xabi Alonso is starting to look at the players who he knows are going to be in his first team, and some of those are going to be guys that are coming back. And you know that it's going to be some of the guys that are coming back because they were good enough to make it into the latter stages of the World Cup. Vis-a-vis the likes of Reece James, Lacroix, Valentin Barco, maybe not so much, but you know there are players coming back that are clearly going to get straight into the first team, aren't there? Morgan Rogers, obviously, as well, being one of them. So look, I think we're in for a big week. I think we're in for a really, really big week. It is exactly 2 weeks today until the first Premier League game, and there is another 3 weeks left of the window in and around. So there's a lot of work to do with outgoings. And look, I think Liam Delap's going to go. I think Emmanuel Omega is probably going to go. I still think Nicholas Jackson. Yeah, and he never got into any of the first teams either. So maybe he's one of the players that's feeling like that as well. But I think that he's destined for Aston Villa. I think that's just going to happen. So look, I feel for Alonso here because you've got 30 odd players in your squad. You need to cut that down to 25 max, but ultimately 22, and you've still got players to come back in. So yeah, I get it at the end of the day, and I feel like we've been seeing some of these players like that out on the pitch. Like I say, Liam Delap playing within himself feels like he knows that he's going. I feel the same way about Tosin Adarabioyo, and watching the game yesterday, I kind of felt the same way about Jamie Gittins. So Pedro Neto as well, I guess, could be considered to be one of those, albeit he did start the AC Milan game. When he came off, he looked really mad. Do you know what I mean? Even though he had a really good performance. So look, it does feel like Xabi Alonso's got to pick his team at the end of the day, hasn't he? He absolutely has to pick his team. And if he was desperate to keep all of these players because he liked them so much, then they would feel like that at the end of the day. So yeah, I don't feel so bad for the players as much as I do for Xabi Alonso, because that's a really difficult situation to deal with. But it's another thing that leads me to believe that we are going to see a lot of outgoings in the coming weeks. So guys, I'm going to start wrapping the video up there. It's been a bit of a long one, but it's because I've been doing winners and losers for the last 2 days, so we're catching up on a little bit of news as well. But I want to know what you think about everything that we've talked about today. If you could choose between Martin Zubimendi and Fabian Ruiz, who would you go for? Tosin Adarabioyo to Benfica makes sense and hopefully happens soon. Enzo Fernandez, still a massive question mark. Supposedly we're still looking at Adam Wharton and Alex Scott. And what do we think of the idea of Josh Achiampong getting minutes in one form or another at Crystal Palace next season? And Xabi Alonso is bridging the gap between the academy to the first team, but some of the players weren't happy on the preseason tour because of it. Nice one, guys. Thanks very much for sticking around until the end of the video if you did. Also, don't forget that the latest episode of the Talking Chelsea podcast is out now, so head over to Jay's channel and go and check that out too. I hope you're all having an absolutely wicked day, and I'll catch up with you very, very soon. Take it easy. Peace.